Okay. Welcome back, everyone. This is Christy Walters with Jeff Bajorek and Mike Simmons, and we are here today for the live edition of the Why and the Buy book club, and we are discussing The One Thing, the surprisingly simple truth behind extraordinary results by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. This has been a really instrumental book for me, and I'm excited to get into this discussion. So thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Christy. Mike Simmons from the Catalyst Sale Podcast is here. You are going to hear Mike in a couple of weeks again on our show. We recorded an interview earlier today, so glad that Mike could stick around with us. And I love that this is a live kind of thing. Sometimes we get a lot of people, sometimes we get a few people, but if you're fortunate enough to have the time, or if you're dedicated enough to make the time, it's a really cool interaction. And I think a lot of people make the mistake that if you haven't read the book, then you can't come. If you at all are interested in the concepts contained in the book, or if any of those concepts resonate with you, then come on and talk about them. That's the whole point. And, we're going into June, which is networking month, and this is a really great way to interact, make a connection, extend a digital hand, so to speak, for that digital handshake. And we will kind of increase the map of connections that we all kind of picture in our heads when we think about networking. I think of the old US Sprint commercials, right? You remember their logo, and it's a map of the country and all these little points connected by lines. Anyway, I love that it's live. And so here's a quick little fun thing before we get to the book. What's the first word that comes to mind when you think live?
Don't curse.
Don't curse.
But that's
it's
too
Saturday night.
Live from New York is Saturday night.
That's
Actually,
it.
and I don't know why this was, but the first thing that comes to mind when I think about live is Pearl Jam, because they released like 150 live, quote unquote, bootlegs of all their shows, because they were being bootlegged so often. So they just took it right from the soundboard and produced them themselves. Like, why mess with the bootleg? You can have the real thing. But there's a cool, Christy, this is such a great idea that you had. And you
always give me all the credit.
This was your idea. Listen, credit where credit's due, but we have these interactions here, and people can chime in. And I think we'll continue to do these. And if we can find a way to have people, comment, even if you can't join us via video, can you watch the stream? Can you comment? And there's all kinds of different ways to do that. And we'll see about exploring that. But anyway, what's the one thing we should be talking about right now?
The one thing.
So what's your first takeaway, Christy?
So I'm one of these students that will have to read this book so many times over and over again. I am constantly asking myself, what is the one thing? How do I refocus? Because the way that my brain works, and if you've listened to this podcast long enough, you've heard enough of my gaffes to know that it tends to go off in these little tangents very quickly. And so I will take that one thing, that really focused idea, and then we'll get all of these incredible brainstorms that come off of that. Mm-hmm. And the excitement will sweep me away. And before you know it, I have 15 projects that are 75 or 80% done, and I'm feeling overwhelmed because nothing's getting completed, and my to-do list is a mile long. So I need this in a big way. And honestly, Jeff, I think we see this with our small business clients a lot too. This is a small business owner challenge, because you are being hit with so many things at one time, and it's hard to make the hard choice. You feel like you're gonna walk away from something, or you're not gonna be able to have as much if you don't focus on everything at one time. And the reality is it's just not possible. So I think that's probably my biggest thing, is that it's just not possible to do more than one thing really well. And that doesn't mean one thing forever. It means one thing right now. What's the most important thing that such by doing so makes everything else easier or unnecessary? And I love that focusing question.
It's a pretty vital question, and it's a very difficult one to answer if you are in a place where you have so much abundance that you can afford to turn things off or just not do things, then that's great. The difficult thing is that very few of us are actually in that position. I'm not one of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me to say, look, I understand that I can only do so many things very, very well at the same time, and it's really just one thing. We'll get into priorities in a minute. There's only that one thing you can do. Well, what do I shut off? Well, if all these roads lead to opportunity, then how do I turn myself away from certain opportunities? And the most difficult thing is taking the leap and saying, look, I've got to redouble or retriple my efforts in this particular avenue in order to make all those other things possible, rather than trying to do all those possible things at the same time. You feel like you have to say no, and you do, and you feel like saying no is not a way to accomplish anything, right? It's counterintuitive. The biggest takeaway, and this was the second time I've listened to this book. I was really fired up when we picked this because I didn't have to use an audible.com credit on it because I already had it. But the priorities is an oxymoron. There's no such thing. And when you go back and you look at the root of the word and you look at the history of the word, priorities, and when it started coming into favor, it was after we already had so many things to do. And creating priorities meant that we didn't have to say no as often as we know we really should. And it's really, we're pulling the wool over our own eyes when we say, we have several priorities. What is your priority? And when you can make those decisions and be decisive about what is really important, when you can build boundaries around what is really important, everything else gets way easier. But it's a tough leap to make. What's been your experience, Mike? You're over there nodding. You look like you're taking notes or probably working on something else that's actually a priority. What's your experience with it?
Actually, I'm actively reading through my highlights.
I was reading. I thought he would be reading notes.
So I'm prepared to have this conversation because I was not. But the big thing that jumps out at me is there's this constant fear of missing out. Right. This whole idea of, oh, wow, there's always something better. There's the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence, or somebody's got a better situation than you've got. And if you allow yourself to be managed by everybody else's request, you're not going to accomplish the things that are really important to you, or the things that you need to focus on. And I think Christy hit the nail on the head when she was talking about that focus on one item. We can't be doing multiple things at a time. Many of the biggest mistakes happen when you're trying to do multiple things at a time. Texting while driving, not a good idea.
Right.
We've got a kid who's just getting ready who's in the process of learning how to drive. One of our rules is the phone goes in the center console, and it's there from the moment you pull out of the driveway until you get to wherever you're going. And then I go and I drive with him, and I've got the phone right next to me, and every once in a while I'm checking the map on it. And you're like, okay, now I'm not modeling good behavior. But to get this back to the one thing, I think it's that focus of, here's where my time, energy, and attention needs to be right now so that I can get the thing done. And then I can move on to that next thing.
Well, and I think that's a really important point to make about the concepts in the book, is that they talk about the one thing, and the one thing in multiple categories, right? So you have the one thing in your spiritual life, you have the one thing in your family life, or the one thing in your professional life, but you really block time so that the right amount of time is spent focused on the one thing that is going to move things forward, that's going to make an impact on that particular area of your life. And then everything else just gets squeezed into the space that is left. And I think one of the things I liked in the book, towards the back, they were kind of summarizing some of the elements. And this, some of the big ideas is that, one, you have to get used to saying no. And that's such a hard habit to build. because we are such a pleaser society. Like everybody, it's like if you say no, then what kind of person are you? Like, why would you say no to this? Why would you say no? That? Yeah. Who says no? What does that mean? And so you have to get used to what that feels like for you and what kind of reaction you might get from other people as well. And then the second thing that they noted right behind that was get used to chaos, because as soon as you focus in on your one thing, so if you're going to say, I'm going to spend 4 hours of my day focused on the one thing that is going to make the difference in my family life today, and everything else takes a back seat, I'm just focused on this one thing for this time block of 4 hours. It's going to make the rest of the day kind of chaotic because everything else is going to get shoved into that space. And that's okay, because that's where it's supposed to be.
Right. Yeah. The other concept beyond the priorities as an oxymoron concept, what I really like, and as I listened to it the second time was reminded of, is the domino theory. Is that a domino is capable of knocking over another domino, if placed correctly, knocking over another domino that's double its size or something. Like it's a logarithmic factor, and if you just place a couple of dominoes one after another, you can really, just by the effort it takes to knock over one small domino, you can knock over enormous structures. And because it just continues to go up and up and up and up, and by factors, and that is a tangible. It's a very tangible exercise or a very tangible example, because when people say, "Oh yeah, right, how can I just do one thing and then everything else falls into place?" That's impossible. It's like, no, actually, it is possible. Let's prove it in physics. And so we will show you that in the world that we live in, things like this are possible. So allows you to, it allows the concept to manifest itself in a very concrete way. That allows your brain, like what we were talking about earlier, Mike, is it allows your brain to rewire itself along the lines that something so far-fetched is actually possible because you've just watched it with your own eyes. Now your perspective changes, and now you're even aware that something so counterintuitive is actually very, very true. And I love that they put it at the beginning of the book. It gets everything, it sets everything off on the right cadence and on the right, it gets the right messaging in the right place. Of course it does. What's the one thing that we could do to make the rest of this book really effective? Let's prove everybody that this whole thing is even possible, right? I mean, and even when you look at the organization of the book, it's structured in such a way. Let's get the concepts out of the way, and then we'll teach you how. And they did that. It's powerful.
Well, and the other thing that I liked is this concept that
I think we lost Mike for a second.
I think we did lose Mike. That willpower is always on will call. And the idea, this idea of willpower, meaning that I just have to have enough willpower to go and get this thing done, or, it's a finite resource. You can't keep exhausting it. Right. So, I think there's a lot of truth to that issue. And a lot of people use that word nonstop. They think that, well, I just don't have enough willpower. It's an opportunity just to beat yourself up. And
that's counterproductive.
It is counterproductive because it's a completely wasted emotion. I have one of my daughters suffers from pretty severe anxiety, and early when she was a child, when we would kind of talk through the challenges with anxiety, and we would talk through how anxiety is such a wasted emotion. It's you're anxious about the future, something that you have no control over. I mean, these are things that become just cycles in your mind, and it stops you. It completely stops you in your tracks. And it's hard. It's not as easy as saying, well, just know that it's not worth it. Stop worrying about it. That doesn't work either.
It doesn't.
But it is logically, if you can recognize the challenge that comes with trying to think that willpower is something that you can kind of manufacture more of, like you just kind of like take on a little bit more weight. It just doesn't work.
Well, and so beating yourself up for not having the willpower or the discipline ends up sending you in the opposite direction that you're intending to go. And I love what you said, and I wrote it down, and I'm going to tweet it later, that beating yourself up is a completely wasted emotion. Mm-hmm. Very, very powerful. Spoken like a true coach. And I love too that this book says some things that fly in the face of an earlier book club title of Extreme Ownership, and Jocko Willink saying that discipline equals freedom. Well, I just need to be more disciplined. I need to be more disciplined. Okay, what does that really mean? Mm-hmm. It's one thing to get up at 4:30 in the morning every day and work out and take a picture of your hairy arm and your watch like Jocko does. And I love the video. It's a little 15-second videos. Go get some today, y'all. Out, right? But the idea that, when you have a tank, you have a gas tank, you've got a bandwidth, there's only so much that you can do. Mm-hmm. And you need to recognize that when you only have so much time to do so many different things, you have to make sure that you put those things that you need to do first, right? It's not, I'm going to get to that. I notice it myself. If I've got a meeting, if I've got something going on at the end of the day, I can't settle down until that thing's done. So I try to schedule my most important stuff first, because I don't want to be waiting till 7:00 for that training course, for that keynote speech, for whatever, because the rest of my day ends up getting wasted, because I want to make sure that I have enough time, I have enough gas in the tank to make sure I can deliver on that performance. I want to make sure that I'm fresh. I want to make sure that that which is important gets taken care of. But I know myself. It's not like I can just sleep until 5:00 and then wake up and make that my new fresh time, right? I mean, I lose focus on it, and I don't want to not be focused on the really, really important stuff. So I've kind of stopped doing that. People will ask me, "Hey, is this training course? Is this group discussion? Is this available in the evening?" I'm like, no. It's not, because I want to make sure that I can deliver what you're asking me to deliver, and I'm not going to do that in the evening. It's got to be important enough for you to get to at 4:00. I'll push it to the end of the afternoon, but I'm not going to push it to the evening, because it hasn't worked well in the past. And I may have skewed off topic there a little bit, but there's only so much gas in the tank, and there's going to be a certain amount of gas expended throughout the rest of your day. So do the important stuff when you know you're best capable of doing it. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's those individual steps that get you toward that ultimate objective. And if you don't, the quote for me that continues to come up, and I'll butcher it here, but it's the journey of 10,000 miles begins with one step. Mm-hmm. And you've got to keep taking those incremental steps. Now you can get back to focus and evaluating and saying, am I moving in the right direction? It doesn't mean that you've got to keep going on the path that you start on.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Still evaluate things, but keep taking those steps, keep moving things forward, keep focused on that attention. And then as you look back, you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish. However, if you get caught in that trap of trying to do too many things, and I think one of the quotes in there is that if you say yes to everything, you really say yes to nothing. Yep. If you're so focused on saying yes to everything, you never really get a chance to connect all of those steps in a row to get you closer to whatever that objective is that you're moving toward.
Well, and, it's interesting. I actually listened to the One Thing podcast with Jeff Woods, and I learned something new from it every time I listened, because he coaches a lot of the guests that come on the show. And I might have even missed this in the Audible recording if I had not been listening to him coach someone on the show. But he really focused in on the concept that big is bad, right? These big, hairy, audacious goals that we all love to put out there, which are great. There's nothing wrong with establishing a dream, but that's just a goal. That's something that goes up on, up on a wall somewhere, or in a place where you can remind yourself of where you're ultimately headed. But you have to take the little steps. And he was even pushing, and I can't even remember the guy that he was coaching at the time, but he was even pushing him to make even smaller commitments. He's like, I don't want you to tell me what you think I want to hear. I want you to tell me what you can do every single day that will become a habit for you. And such, by doing so, it will make everything else easier or unnecessary. And it comes down to, sometimes it comes down to, 10 minutes of meditation. It comes down to, I'm going to show up at the gym every morning for 30 minutes. I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do at the gym when I'm there. I'm going to build the habit of showing up at the gym. And oh, by the way, when that becomes a part of every ounce of my being, because I've done it for so long, then I'll get more specific about what the one thing is that I do when I'm at the gym. So it's those little things that really start to change the habits that you face on a daily basis. And it wasn't until I heard him go through that exercise with someone that I really connected with this concept that that big is the way we have to go with every goal that we set.
So what are you doing differently now? This has been execution month. We've been reading the one thing, listening to the one thing, studying the one thing, highlighting the one thing. What are you doing differently now, Christine? What are you doing moving forward as a real world example? What are you eliminating, or what are you doing more of, or what are you eliminating so you can do more of that? Your turn. You go first.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. Like calling me out. I'm like, damn it, Jeff.
Like you didn't know I was going to do that. It doesn't take a pre-call meeting for me to telegraph my intentions.
So for me, I'm eliminating lists. I'm focusing in on one thing that I need to do. Now my business, I do have kind of carved up into a couple of different categories. So there's the one thing that I need to do to grow my coaching business, the one thing that I need to do to grow my speaking business, and then the one thing that I need to do in the podcasting space. So it all kind of feeds back up to what my ultimate objective is for my business. But I really, I have so many woulda, coulda, shouldas on my list that it weighs heavily on me. And so I always feel like things are undone. And so that's been the thing that I have focused on most this month. And you'll have to ask me next month if that's still going well. So,
oh no, I was just pressing you for a commitment.
No, I love it. No, you know me. I'm the homework coach. I love giving homework for people, but I that's been my biggest thing, is just trying to silence all the ideas that are spinning around in my head a little bit and get focused in on the one thing in a particular area that I need to do. So, and it creates a little bit of an anxiety, I have to say.
Yeah.
As wasted of an emotion as that is, but yeah.
I think Christy created an opportunity for you to be an accountability partner here.
Oh, he's good at that too. He's a good accountability partner.
She did. No, I took some notes. It's funny. You said you were eliminating lists as I was writing one. What about you, Mike? I'll
transfer mine to you. You can hang on to that for a while.
There you go.
I went a little old school. I invested in 2 whiteboards, the little cheap $20 ones that you can pick up at Costco. And I now have them mounted on my wall here in the office to help me keep focused. And the focus is around 3 key areas. It's family, it's self, and it's the business. And just as long as we're got each of those up there with some items that have some deadlines and dates on when I want to deliver certain certain things. It serves as a great reminder each day. If I'm doing something that doesn't align with family, self, or business, am I really spending my time in the right place? So I went old school and threw up a couple of whiteboards in the office.
Love it. Oh, love it. Old school. That's awesome.
Yeah. I've got a whiteboard that I recently cleared, and I'm starting to use it a little bit differently than I had been. I realized that I wasn't in the routine of looking at a whiteboard for a long time. So I came up and I'm like, wow, I haven't looked at that whiteboard, let alone written anything differently on it in quite some time. And so I like the idea. And what I've recently done, and actually taken it to, I have a digital whiteboard in that I have an iPad with an Apple Pencil. And so in Evernote, I have a whiteboard and I can type in it and I can write in it. So it's either made my whiteboard that's up right here, up to my right over my right shoulder. It's either made it either more or less valuable. I haven't figured that out yet, but the strategic planning process of it. And, there's something about actually writing something rather than typing it. So I like that about the Apple Pencil and the iPad. But for me, I looked at seeing a lot of things that I really wanted to do that I thought would be really valuable that I didn't have any place to put in. And I'm like, okay, hold on. That means that I'm probably committed to too many things. And it means that probably some of these things I want to do, I probably won't be able to pull off. But what are these things that I want to do, and why am I pulled in so many different directions, and what of those directions can I cut? When I tipped my hand a little bit earlier when we were talking, I have a podcast. I haven't listened to a lot of other podcasts, and I've got a lot of friends that have podcasts. I have a hard time keeping up with just the podcast of my friends, right? But there are some that I need to listen to, and those need to be my go-tos. And it's not that I don't have time. I have time. It's that I don't have a routine. And now where a lot of people drive to work every day, and so they listen to a podcast, or they listen to their morning drive show, or they listen to an audiobook or whatever, I put the headphones on occasionally, right? When I'm cutting the lawn, occasionally when I'm hitting golf balls or something like that. But I don't always know what I want to listen to. It depends on my mood, right? And it should depend on my mood when I want to do that. So I need to build a routine for myself for what I'm going to listen to, when I'm going to listen to it. And I know that if I can focus on some of that specific content, I know I will be better for it. And it's like, even with these book clubs, it's great. We pick a different author all the time, but there's so much content out there to be consumed. Walk through a Barnes and Noble. I like walking through a bookstore rather than just browsing Amazon, but walk through a Barnes and Noble and count how many books you'd love to read. And then just admit to yourself that you can't read them all.
You just have to look at my wish list on Audible and see it.
Exactly. And then it's, my wife looked at me the other day. She's like, do you ever read fiction? I'm like, no, why would I? And then you start thinking about it because a lot of people can tell a great story, and lots of, teach a lot of great lessons through metaphors and through stories. We all learn through stories. It's what we do as sales professionals. We tell stories. As marketers. We tell stories. Why not listen to great storytellers? Well, I'm too busy listening to the real thing. Like, it's none of it's bad. That's the problem. And that's why it's so hard to say no, because you're saying no to stuff that is I don't want to say this. It's really easy to say no to something is bad. Okay?
Oh, sure. Right.
It's not easy to say no to something that might help you, or especially that will help you. Right? So for a guy who owns his own business and makes his own schedule, why don't I play more golf? Right? Well, because I'm spread too thin at work. Why aren't I spending more time with the kids? Why aren't I playing golf with the kids? Well, because and it's not about making time. It's about putting boundaries around that stuff and not letting the other stuff that could be beneficial, but you shouldn't put your hands in, interfere. And so the last 6-7 weeks, and even going through the next few, this is where I'll tie my diatribe all together, is what can I get rid of? What can I eliminate? What do I need to focus on? What are the absolutes that I need to take care of on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? And then write them all down. That's where the whiteboard comes in. That's where the iPad comes in. Write it all down. What are those absolutes in terms of time commitments? And what's interesting when you count all that stuff up, it's way less than it feels like it. It feels like I've got 80 hours worth of work to do every week, because my brain is running 80 hours a week. And then you count it all up and it's really more like 25. And it's like, well, wait a second. I could either find more to do, which is a good thing when you're trying to grow a business, or I could just do less and be okay with that, which is
still
really
grow your
hard.
business, by the way.
No question, but it's really, really hard. It's another counterintuitive concept. And that's why I love the timing of this book and when it came along and tying it to execution. And, our theme for the month of May was execution, but to tie a book that tells you to do less. And at the same time, I'm actually this book doesn't tell you to do less. This book says focus on the thing that's going to make everything else easier to do or not necessary to do. The other book I'm reading at the same time is by Greg McKeown, and it's called Essentialism. And that is do less, do better with less, do more of less and do it better. Mm-hmm. So I did that very purposefully to tie the two themes together. And it's been a difficult thought process for me, but it's been, I think, a very valuable one.
Well,
how often do you get, sorry, Christy, how often, and just tied to what Jeff is sharing here, how often do you find yourself doing other things because you're procrastinating and you're avoiding the hard thing that you need to get done and is being busy?
Productive procrastination, right?
Yep.
Lots of times. There are times where, and as someone who likes to write lists, I get 80% done with that list and I'm like, I'm good. I could finish that list, but then I wouldn't have anything to start with tomorrow. And I have a very difficult time sitting idly. So once I get the big stuff done, and I never miss a deadline, but it's like, oh, I have to have that thing done. Well, it's not due till next week. Oh, okay, that's fine. Or I'll start telling myself a lie that I could have 3 of my weekly newsletters done for the next 3 weeks. But I like to be topical. I like to be current. I like to be, those are things. I mean, and Christy, you and I even talked about it yesterday.
Yeah.
How much of it is, this is just who I am and I should be comfortable with that and I should own up to it. And how much of it is, I'd really like to change that. And would I really like to change it? Or do I just say I'd like to change it? I mean, there are a lot of really look in the mirror, kind of get honest and real with yourself kind of questions that need to be asked here. And that's why they're so easy to avoid. I'm pretty good at procrastinating. I will say this though, so much of that procrastination ends up being unintentional. A good portion of it, because I'm just curious and I'll follow wormholes, or you get on a phone and someone calls and I should shut the phone off for these 2 hours so I can get this thing done. But instead I took the phone call, and it wasn't urgent, but it was important enough to take at the time. And it was a welcome distraction, maybe not even procrastination, just when do welcome distractions pop up? It happens a lot. But when you have so much time, I mean, we all run our own businesses, so we literally have all day to get most of this stuff done. There isn't really an urgency that's driving it necessarily. Now I can say a couple of weeks ago, Memorial Day weekend, I was traveling Thursday, Friday, and had a wedding to go to Saturday and Sunday. So when I was on the plane and at the airport on Friday, I got everything that I needed to get done for the newsletter to go out Sunday morning, got it done, and had a long weekend with nothing to do, and it was amazing. Right. And that was, I think at the right time, and, timing's everything, but recognizing that at a time when I'm trying to focus on paring down and things, it was really powerful. And so this weekend I spent less time than I normally do. And this coming week, the week that we're in right now, but this coming weekend, I'm done. I'm going to have everything that I need done by Friday afternoon, so I can just shut off and ride bikes with my kids. I mean, which is why I'm doing all this anyway.
Yeah. Well, and that's the challenge of doing what we do, is that it's very easy to allow it to seep into every part of your life, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And the productive procrastination element comes into play even more. And think about how powerful it would be to be focused on the most important thing in your business for 2 hours every morning. And then to just be okay with whatever happened to the rest of the time you spent working in that day. Because, I mean, once you got the most important thing done, kind
the
of,
rest can just fall into place.
Yeah, it kind of falls into place. So, I'm not quite there yet. I'm working on it.
And the flip of that is you can only do so many things first thing in the morning.
True.
So I've tinkered around with that. A lot of people will say, well, I got to go to the gym first thing every morning, because if it doesn't get done first thing, it's not going to get done.
Yeah.
What I noticed is when I went to the gym first thing in the morning and got my workouts in, that wasn't the most important thing that I needed to do at 6 o'clock in the morning. And so I lost that super productive time, and then I'd end up being behind. Whereas when I didn't focus on going to the gym, but I got my stuff done, I had those empty spaces in my calendar when I say, oh, I can take a walk now. I can go work out now. I worked out more often, actually, when I wasn't focused on doing it first thing in the morning, because the thing that would be hanging over my head throughout the day was gone, which enabled me to work out.
Yep.
So it's, if you can only do 3 or 4 things first thing in the morning, what are the 3 or 4 right things to do? And right along with the message of the book, that either, makes those other things easier to do or unnecessary.
Yeah.
Not working out first thing in the morning actually enabled me to work out later. But only through trial and error did I learn that.
Right.
Because if I got a deadline or if I got a bunch of stuff to do, I can't go for a bike ride with my kids after dinner. I can't shut the phone off like I did yesterday at 6 o'clock. I was done. 6 o'clock. Like, I didn't think that was possible. Oh, it's possible. I did it. I'm probably going to do it again today. Because it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, of course it is. But speaking of deadlines, how often, given because we're all in the same situation, we're all small business owners, how often are you creating artificial deadlines and then stressed out about meeting them?
Every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern. Every Wednesday evening.
Mike's pondering that one.
Yeah. Often because it helps me stay focused. If I've got a deadline, if I've got a deadline, then a lot of times I'll do the math. I'll say, okay, well, this is going to take me a couple hours to be able to do this. And then all of a sudden I get to put my game face on and I just get things done. And now I feel like I'm so much more productive. And the reality is that's not always the case. And I've really gotten into this whole timing thing about what time of day do I block off to do creative things? What time of day do I block off for calls? What time of day do I block off for general research? And try to stick to those things. Now, one of the challenges I'll run into is if I've got someone who does business in the UK, I'm kind of forced to do a lot of the activity early in the morning. So I can't take that time to do the writing when my mind is completely fresh. So I think that's another key thing to consider is we're all a little bit different when it comes to when we have those ebbs and flows in energy. Prioritize or focus time and attention on those things in the right time of day. And if that's getting up and doing your workout at 4:30 in the morning, more power to you. But that is the last place I want to be at 4:30 in the morning, is be in the gym. I don't mind waking up at 4:30 in the morning, but
you have to.
I'm not going to start throwing weight around that early in the morning.
Right.
You're not going to be like Jocko.
Nope. Not in that area. No. Not in many areas, but yeah, definitely not that one.
Where this kind of leads me to is, do we overthink things? Do we overthink the concept of a deadline? Does this encourage us overthinking things though, right? Like, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do the other thing? Some of it is just, if you have just a get it done mindset all the time, then you can just kind of power through. But if you're just getting it done all the time, then you're always getting things done and you never have a real perspective for why you're doing it. Mm-hmm. And that's the balance I think that needs to be found.
Well, and if you really want to push the limits, if you want to scale, I think that's really the kind of the idea behind the concept of the book, is that it's about getting extraordinary results. It's not just about getting results. And a lot of people who just focus on get it done all the time miss the opportunity. Like Mike, you mentioned, the path, right? The path could change. You have to have enough perspective and creativity to be able to come back and say, well, now wait a second, it doesn't really work to do it this way anymore. I really should be going down this path. And if you're not coming back and evaluating that, then you're just getting stuff done that isn't going to impact the bottom line. It's not going to move you forward to your ultimate goal. I think one of the challenges that people have is they never develop that overall perspective. And so they're just getting things done. They're checking things off the list constantly. So it becomes this kind of almost an achievement threshold, right? So it's like, okay, how do I judge success? By how much I can achieve. And it's not really moving you toward your ultimate goal. So I think, and I still have perspective on that, to build on that too.
Well, the thing that's throwing me off is I'm looking in the background. I've just noticed you have a big thing that says yes.
I know.
As we're talking about no.
I do. I have a big board behind me that says yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exclamation point.
That's it.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. But it's amazing what you can get done if you keep that level of focus and you reevaluate what you're doing, you reevaluate success, and you take an open mind to it. Like, cause for me, if I get my blinders on and I'm just focused, I can run through a wall, but I may not be running through the right wall.
Yeah.
And right. I don't know what I'm going to do to myself when I run through the wall.
Right. It hurts. I've tried a couple of times. It hurts.
I can assure you I've never run through a wall.
Oh.
All right. So what's the one thing that's going to move your business forward, Jeff? If you had to sum this up, what would be your one thing professionally? We'll stick with the professional category.
Strategic planning. The one thing, I don't have one thing right now. I think thinking, if it has to be one thing, then it's going to be thinking. Never stop thinking about what becomes possible, what I can do, what's going to be the next thing. And I think for me, it's creating space to do the strategic planning that I haven't been doing. And so that strategic planning process has begun. It's continuing to move forward. And the more I focus on the process of strategic planning, the more I'm realizing what is working, what isn't, and things are starting to fall in place. So we're seeing that domino effect to happen. And we can talk about it a little bit after this recording, but what do I need to do to be a little more involved with the promotion of this podcast and the engagement around the promotion of this podcast? And when it comes to, sure, I tweet, I retweet stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that we've been saying. One day we're going to do this. One day we're going to do that. One day, yeah. Okay, let's create some space. Let's create. I'm literally, what are the commitments? What are the action items, and what is the wish list for this client, this other client, this project, this project, this project? And I have those lists started now. There's not too many of them, but I've got them started for a few of my clients. I've got them started for this particular podcast. I've got them started for, how I'm going to promote my book and the workshops around the book and my golf game and the kids and taking weekends off and vacations and things, because I've noticed, like I mentioned before, a lot of things that I want to do that I don't have the time to do. And it's like, wait a second, how do I not have the time to do that? This is really important. So let's review it all. It's very Socratic in that regard. Mm-hmm. So it's the strategic planning portion of it. And only when I know what is going to go into each plan, do I know what I can delegate, what I can hire out, what I absolutely need to have to, what I absolutely need to do myself. And so that's, a big chunk of this week and probably a little bit into next week even, but getting that ball rolling already. So I'm going to say my one thing is the strategic planning process.
Got it. What about you, Mike?
Focus. And that's it. It's just really getting back to focus and saying, here are the things that we need to focus time, energy, and attention on that are going to move the business forward, not continue to keep us on this treadmill. The treadmill that's very service oriented is just that. It's productizing these services and getting to a point where that can be scaled. So focus is where all of my time and attention has been the last couple of weeks. part of that was getting some of those bigger boulders, those bigger things out of the way, the client commitments that were out there that I just had to cross off the list so that I could move on to this stuff. So number one for me is focus.
And I think for me, although I have some of the strategic planning piece that needs to be done, I could spend the rest of my life planning. For me, it's all about prospecting. I know what I do. I know what I do well. I just need to get out there and tell more people about it, and have people who are working with me tell people about it. And I just need to grow my business. So it's all about prospecting for me.
Awesome.
And it's, a lot of that is that, we've talked about a lot about networking. It's not about building a better website. It's not about having a better social media following.
Right.
None of that. It is one-on-one. Get on the phone. Tell me what's going on with you. Tell me how I can help. And if I can't, getting them to the right people, and moving to the next one. I mean, I think that's really it for me. I need to spend a good bit of time prospecting.
Yep.
So
awesome. Well, we've all got action items.
Yes, we do.
We've all got accountability measures. Let's talk about next month. What are we going to do next month? I think that, this month being May being execution month, and June being networking month, Mike Simmons, I know a guy named Mike Simmons, has suggested never eat alone and other secrets to success, one relationship at a time. And since we've got a lot of these interviews recorded for the month of June,
yes,
the big theme that we saw coming over and over and over again was the intentional nature of good networking. And so what got me on this book after Mike suggested it, I've never read it, but I've seen it, is the one relationship at a time thing. Let's stop thinking about scale before we actually get what's in front of us taken care of. So I think it's a beautiful transition from this month into next month. What say you, Christy?
I agree. I'm excited about that one. I've just talked about the fact that I need to really spend a lot more time focused on prospecting, and that needs to be one-to-one.
Perfect.
So I think it's very timely. And Mike, thank you so much for the suggestion.
Sure.
You have to come back, and you have to come back again. See, this is how we work, right? So we're going to rotate.
I feel like I've been sucked into this. I'm committed now to coming.
You are.
It's been a great discussion. Thanks, guys, for inviting me on.
Yeah, thank you for coming. We love these. I think this is awesome. So I hope that we see a lot more of our listeners join us in next month for this discussion. And with that, Jeff, I think, unless you have something else to add.
One quick thing to add, go check Mike Simmons out on the Catalyst Sale podcast, because it's really good. It's worth listening to. It is on my very short list of must listen to podcasts.
Thank you.
No, for sure. It's you and like one or two others, Seth Godin's and Scott Ingram's, and then Malcolm Gladwell's when his comes back. But fortunately, his season alternates with Godin's, so that ends up working.
There you go.
That's good.
He just came back, actually.
So it's not too much of a commitment. Those are the ones that are worth listening to, and if I listen to those, the rest will fall into place. So it's all very good. So thanks for stopping by. Thanks for stopping by, everybody who's watching this on YouTube, or if you're on the mailing list, then and if you're not on the mailing list, get on the mailing list, because you only hear from us once a month, and it's worth hearing from us. So
that's right.
That's it. Christy, I'm good. Do we do that? And you know what? I don't know if we do it, or I don't remember if we do it for the book club, but Christy, when we know our whys,
or our one thing,
then our hows and our whats get much better.
Oh, look at you. You jumped in. You did it.
I did it. I wasn't going to let it. I mean, I just wanted to prove myself in front of everybody that I could say that and not stumble all over it.
You
so
did. Awesome.
Cool.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate it. See ya. Murphy says bye. He's like, what?
As he looks up.